What is up, guys? It is your friendly neighbor Dingo, and today all I've got to talk about really is what happened here in Australia last night, which is of course the return of those IS brides, or rather members. That's the correct term. I'm so tired of mainstream media and everybody else just labeling them as brides as if this was all about marriage. But the scenes that we saw coming out of Melbourne Airport and even Sydney Airport last night were, to be frank, quite disgusting. I think if people had thought, even after the Bondi shooting, if people had thought, oh, hold on, this problem that we're facing with Islamism, especially the very radical, puritanical versions of Islam, infiltrating parts of our society. If you ever thought that was not happening, think again. But last night was perhaps the clearest evidence that it is in fact happening, and it's reached a critical stage where if you don't do something now, then we're looking at a very, very bleak future. For those of you who might not have seen what actually happened in Australia last night, let me quickly show you.
Those court proceedings just finished up a short time ago. Mother and daughter, 53-year-old Kassar Ahmed and 31-year-old Zainab Arneb, both have been remanded in custody, and they will come back to the Melbourne Magistrates Court where they will apply for bail on Monday. I can tell you there was a number of supporters in that courtroom. About a third of the courtroom was filled up with family and supporters. At least 8 males during those court proceedings, which lasted about 15 minutes each, failed to stand when the magistrate entered the room. They were charged, both those women, grandmother and her adult daughter, in the about 8 o'clock this morning after being taken into custody by Australian Federal Police and Victorian Counter-Terrorism Joint Task Force members late last night. They were in handcuffs when they were led away in custody. The 53-year-old charged with several crimes against humanity, including enslavement, possessing a slave, use of a slave. It is alleged that she, after moving to Syria in 2014, purchased or was complicit in the purchasing of a slave for $10,000 US. And again, they will apply for bail on Monday. We saw those chaotic scenes at Melbourne Airport last night when the sister and daughter of the two charged went through the airport with around 8 children and other family members, with a scrum of family supporters that delivered and launched some vile misogynistic abuse at female reporters there covering the story, including from 7 News.
Why did you marry an ISIS terrorist?
Shut
Do you regret what you did?
Crimes against humanity, enslavement. Crimes against humanity, use a slave. Both offences carry a maximum penalty of 25 years imprisonment.
Was it in Syria in the Middle East?
I can say that they were in Syria.
So the AFP says they have been building this case and surveilling these women since 2015. So more than a decade worth of evidence has gone into this. We'll bring the latest on 7 News throughout the day.
Okay, so a few things here for starters. Remember how he said that all these supporters that went to court this morning, actually, they didn't bother standing up for when they were asked to by the magistrate. Now, why would that be? Well, because they don't believe in the laws of Australia. They really don't. They don't. These are, by the way, all these people are members of IS. The people who attended the airport last night with the big Salafist beards and the black shirts and black jackets, all these people are current members of IS living in Melbourne and Sydney. These are the people who went in numbers, but there were what, like 50 of them waiting to pick up their IS sister and escort her to a bus and try to protect her from the media and everybody else. That's who they were. Make no mistake about it. We are seeing these people. They're so unashamed. They're so open about who they are because you know what? They know that the Australian police, the Australian government, the Labor government especially, they're not going to do anything about them. If the government and the police have allowed, and the intelligence services, they have allowed these women to return with no problems really, then why would they even bother deporting and even denationalizing people who are already here? And we're talking about men, military-aged men. You saw those images there. They are so unbothered. And of course, because they are part of IS and they believe in the most pure version of Islam as practiced by Muhammad back in the day, that's exactly why they don't stand in an Australian court, because they don't believe in them. They don't believe in these laws. They don't believe in our laws. They believe Sharia supersedes everything. That's what they're going to live by. Why do you think these people, these women, purchased slaves while they were in Syria under this new caliphate? Why do you think that is? That is because Muhammad did the exact same thing during his lifetime. And it was something that Islamic countries continue to do after Muhammad. In fact, running one of the largest slave trades in human history, with Mauritania, an Islamic country, outlawing slavery in only like 2007, and yet it's still ongoing. And the other thing that was really making the rounds on X and everywhere else last night and even today was this particular thing where all these IS supporters and members just know this is what Anthony Albanese and Tony Burke are doing to you. They are filling up your communities with people like this. Remember that video I showed you guys a couple of days ago where Tony Burke was like, oh, these people are the ones who are trying to build houses for Australians during this housing crisis. I don't think these people are building houses, guys. I think they're doing something quite opposite to building houses. They are part of destroying this civilization. That's what they are doing. But what really caught everyone's attention, and the previous news segment actually alluded to this, was how they spoke to female journalists at the airport last night. Just have a listen to this. Get on the way. Get on the way.
Why did you marry an ISIS terrorist? Why have your children been radicalised?
What are you going to do now here in Melbourne?
Now, this journalist asked a very reasonable question. Why did you marry an ISIS terrorist to this woman? And what did this guy say? This inbred, unshowered person, what did he say? He said, shut up, slut. And I immediately told people, even on X, I was immediately like, hey, this is how they see non-Muslim Western women. Genuinely. And this is quite explicit. Even if you look at the files that got released about the grooming gangs in the UK, even when you look at all the SA that happens in places like Europe and even America, there is an explicit racial and religious undertone to all these crimes, because they view non-Muslim women this way, as easy, promiscuous people that, you do whatever you want with them. And this is what is actually within the fundamentals of the religion itself, where they consider non-Muslim women as free to take if you essentially, conquer them. And I've said this many times, the reason why a lot of them commit these sort of crimes, the R word and SA across Europe, Australia, wherever they go, they do it because they feel like through the migration or through the hijrah, they are taking part in some sort of conquest. They are trying to convert these areas that aren't Muslim into Islamic areas. And they believe they're winning. And because they are, they feel like these are just war booty, captives of war. What the Quran calls what your right hand possesses, alluding to sex slaves. That is why it is so easy for them to see a woman in a journalist position like this and immediately resort to that word. That is why. And I believe they later actually punched her in the stomach as well. That is how much they respect non-Muslims. For everybody who always talks about, oh, this religion is here to coexist with everybody else, when you look at the people who practiced Islam to its truest form, which is these people here, that is how they think and how they view non-Muslims. This is not hyperbole anymore. This is there for you to see. And I think for a lot of Australians, these images from last night, tens, maybe 50 men, all wearing black, in Salafist beards, going to pick up their ISIS brides or ISIS members. All these people are part of that group. All these people are part of networks. And this particular person, immediately what was happening was, everyone wanted to know who said this. This is the guy here. He's the one who said that. They all wanted to know who this was. And guess what? The internet being so great, they immediately found out. And the story gets even worse. So, Wissam Salma is the person who did this. He's the one who's responsible for calling the reporter what he did. And apparently, he has a family member who was killed after they joined a terrorist organization. Now, we know how that would have happened. It was probably IS again. They were probably fighting in their little caliphate and got killed in an airstrike. That's almost certainly what happened. Now, curiously, there's another piece of really interesting information here. His brother Omar was the guy who brought a gun into the MCG. Now, I don't know if you remember that news, but it was perhaps reported on for like a day or two before he got buried. but a man, or I believe it was maybe even two men, were able to smuggle in weapons into the MCG during a game in Melbourne. And they were only caught at the last minute. They went through all the checks, they brought them in, they were inside when they were caught. Now, of course, you have to wonder, what was a guy related to someone like this, to a family like this? What were they doing with weapons during a high attendance AFL game? What were their goals? I think we all know. I think we all know from what happened at the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester. I think we all know from the incidents in Europe and even here in Bondi. I think we all know exactly what their plan was, and it was foiled. Luckily, I am honestly in disbelief. This video has some sound issues because this was the original that was reported, but as you can see, just look at them. Like, there's so many of them. Some are trying to hide their identity. Others, they're so blatant about it because they are so confident that the Australian government, they aren't going to do anything to them. Because remember, at the end of the day, even the Bondi shooters were under surveillance. They were on ASIO list, and yet it happened. So you can call into question how effective our government is when it comes to tackling this issue. And to be honest, I don't think they will do anything, and even if they could. And after seeing these images from last night, I'm telling you, I will absolutely vote for any political party or candidate whose main mission is to be able to denaturalize and deport people like this. Thousands need to leave this country. Hundreds of thousands, actually. These people do not belong in Australia. They do not make Australia safe. They do not make Australia great. They do not contribute anything to Australia. All they bring to Australia, even if they were born here, I want them denaturalized and deported. Because all they contribute to this country is making you feel unsafe, is contributing towards these terror networks operating. They bring death and destruction upon innocent people. And yet we are all allowed to say, oh no, that's fine. These people can completely coexist. They're so nice. They run kebab shops. I bought a halal snack pack from them. Who gives a fuck? You know, the other thing I found very interesting was in a lot of these videos, I saw that a lot of these people were wearing like these really expensive watches. Like, I believe I don't know if you can see it here. Maybe it was this guy here. He was wearing a really expensive watch, one of those Richard Mille watches. And I also noticed there was a lot of Louis Vuitton. And I immediately wondered, you know what? Are these people also running those NDIS businesses and getting really rich and obviously funneling that money through their terrorism financing groups overseas? It is almost certain that that's also happening. But the fact that I saw a lot of wealth behind all these people who are clearly part of these groups immediately made me wonder, is that how they were able to hire the lawyer who's now representing these brides, who also happened to be the person who represented, if you didn't know about this, the mushroom serial killer, that lady who cooked up poisonous mushrooms and essentially got rid of her entire family. That's the lawyer who represented her. That's the person they hired to represent these IS members. And I can't imagine that person would have been cheap. And I also don't think it's the taxpayer funding those lawyers. So to hire someone like that, you would have to have a lot of money. And watching these videos, it became very clear to me that this network is also very wealthy. Now, as you know, a lot of organized crime in these areas like Western Sydney and areas where there is a high concentration of Muslims. Lots of organized crime, lots of fraud like NDIS fraud, Australia's version of Somali daycares. They're rorting billions and billions of dollars from the government. This is exactly how they're doing it. This is how they're funding expensive lawyers. This is how they're funding all these people to get there, hiring private buses, all of that. That is how they're funding them. So while all of this is happening, did anyone in the moderate Islamic community come out and say, oh, this is so bad. It sucks that these IS brides have returned or IS members have returned. This is terrible. It makes our community worse. It makes our community unsafe. You know, all that. Where are all the prominent Islamic groups or famous Islamic influencers or prominent Muslims? Where are they? Not a single one has come out and disavowed these people or disavowed what we saw last night. Not one word. They've said absolutely nothing about this. What does that immediately tell me? That they don't have a problem with this. They really don't. The fact that the people that they would immediately say, oh no, they're not real Muslims. But now that they've returned and made our communities unsafer, immediately these people are nowhere to be found. That says it all, doesn't it? Now, of course, the other thing I wanted to show you guys was from Big Chocky. If you don't know who that is, he's one of the most famous influencers on Instagram. Leans right-wing, I believe. And he had this to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the first person to fucking call out the media, and I can't stand a lot of journalists. But does that mean I would actively abuse and allegedly assault journalists while doing their job? Even if they were running a story on me? Not a fucking chance. Why? Well, imagine the fucking optics of that, right? And that's what these individuals have gone and done. The question number one is, did these individuals accurately represent Australia with the way that they treat women doing their job? I'll let you answer that. Question number two is, in what part of Australia were we raised to treat women like that? Now, I'll leave both of those questions with you. You can go back and watch the footage and deduce an answer yourself. I think you all know where I stand. And that's my take from the controversial coach. If you don't like it, fuck off.
Okay. Well, if you were born and raised in Western Sydney, in part of these Muslim areas, I would assume that's where you learnt it, to answer his question. But that is not why I am showing you this video. I am showing it to you because for a controversial coach and someone who's really outspoken about these things, he left this rather interesting comment. This isn't about religion. It's about respect. For Australia's #1 influencer to say everything that happened last night is not about religion, that is just insane to me. Why is it so hard for even the so-called right-wing influencers to be able to call out Islam? What's the problem here? Like, what are you so concerned about? Are you on the Tucker Carlson sort of bandwagon where your audience is now primarily Muslim? I don't believe that is the case for him. But for people who are so pro-free speech, people who are talking about how controversial they are, controversial coaches and whatever, when the evidence is right before their eyes, and it keeps happening. The Bondi shooting, everything since October 7 in 2023, all these things that are happening in Australia right now, all the extremism that existed in Australia after October 7, they essentially all came out like cockroaches being sprayed with mortine. They all came out. And it is now plain for all of us to see. Now we're seeing we have a massive problem in this country. An imported problem, by the way. A lot of this is homegrown, but there is also an imported problem. And yet, some of these big influencers, and this is not the first person I've called out like this. I called out Isaac Butterfield a few weeks ago for saying the exact same thing. For something that was so obvious, he's like, oh no, it's not about religion. Well, of course it is. What does the I in IS stand for? How are you different to the AFB commissioner right after the Bondi shooting? She went out and said, oh, this shooting had nothing to do with Islam. Or Albanese or Tony Burke, who always make excuses for the worst people in this country. These people, by the way, these IS members, if the Labor government can't do it, if some of Australia's biggest influencers can't do it, then who can? I think one of the first steps in trying to fix this problem, and I've said this many times in many of my videos, is to be able to speak the truth. If you're not willing to contend with the fact that this religion poses a threat to Western civilization, to a threat to every single Australian currently living in Australia, and even to the people that Australia has given refuge to, fleeing from these very people, whether it be Yazidis, Christians, Jews, ex-Muslims like myself, if you are not going to be able to call this out, are you making society better or are you making it worse? I'll let you guys answer that question. And on that note, that's all I have for today. If you like that video, please give it a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. Comment your thoughts down below. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the song that's coming up, and I'll see you next time.